We've all seen those HGTV shows where it takes 5 minutes for them to find a property, and then the whole show is about the problems they have when they are fixing it up. But we know that's kind of ridiculous because most of the time, and a very common question I get asked is, how long is it really gonna take for me to find the right deal? I've got over 20 years experience in the industry, and I wanna show you how long it takes, as well as some of my best secrets for speeding up the process. Let's get started. How long does it take to actually find a deal? How long does it really take? We hear people talking about it all the time. It's a frequently asked question that I get. So I want to talk about what realistic expectations are for finding a property. I want to talk about some of the biggest downfalls that new investors make frequently. I want to talk about the main factors in finding and flipping timelines and things that you need to be concerned about and how to avoid them. So what's the real answer here? How long is it going to take you to find a deal? The real answer is it depends, okay? It depends, but I know that's not the answer you came here for. So what I want to do is give you a frame of reference, and I want to give you some things to think about to help you put that exact time frame in your mind. So that's what I want to do today, and I'm going to help you create a plan that's designed for you so you can get some idea on how long it will take you individually to get a property. So factors in finding a deal. Let's just peel the onion on this. The first thing we need to talk about is price range, okay? Typically, the higher the price range, the longer it will take to find a deal. So a big caution here is you want to make sure you stay under the FHA price range for the area. So you may be asking, how can I know? Well, all you've got to do is go to Google and search FHA price range for blank county. Whatever county you're in, you can just put that in there and you will find out what the FHA price range is. Now, what is the FHA? Basically, it's the limit that the Federal Housing Administration will allow for a loan. So if it's not going FHA, it would have to go conventional type loan. Most buyers are buying in the FHA because it's one of the easiest loans to get. It has the least amount of down payment, and that's where the majority of the buyers actually are. Okay, my rule of thumb is to stay under 500,000 or the FHA, whichever's less. I never want to go over 500,000. I really like it if FHA is at 500, so I can stay under for both of those. If my FHA was lower than that 500,000, I would probably go with that FHA limit. What's the highest FHA will do? Not to exceed $500,000. Okay, this all has to do with how long it's going to take to find a property. Low in price range. Be really careful in the low end price ranges. My rule of thumb is I don't like to invest in properties that aren't worth $70,000 or greater. In some areas you can't buy anything for that. In other areas you can buy them, but they're not in great neighborhoods. So you really want to stay away from difficult neighborhoods. My rule of thumb, if I should invest in that neighborhood or not, is very simple. This is my litmus test. Would I let my wife walk down the street alone at night? Okay, if the answer to that question is no, I don't want to be buying in that area. If the answer to that question is yes, I'm willing to buy in that area. That's really what it comes down to. That's how I determine that. And you're going to have an easier time finding some properties in some bad areas than you are finding properties in some good areas, which all of this has to do with how long is it going to take you to find a deal. I don't want to invest in those types of areas. If you're willing to, you're going to find a deal faster. If you're not willing to, then you're going to take a little more time, but I think you're going to be better off. The lower the price range, the easier it is to actually find properties. The higher, the more time it will take. So keep in mind that even if the margin is the same, there's a higher dollar amount. So this is what's interesting, okay? Many investors think, what if I could make $250,000 and do one deal, or $100,000 and do one deal a year? Well, they don't think through this entirely. So I can tell you those homes have very different buyers. Like yesterday, I was just at a parade of homes in Park City, Utah. It's a $6.5 million house. Well, I can tell you there's a big difference between the light fixtures. I can tell you there's a big difference between the quality. There's a big difference between what's happening in that area than there is in some of the other areas. And what I find is a lot of investors go in there with a mindset of a $250,000 property, and they try and do $1 million property, and they paint it and they put in some fixtures from Home Depot, and people come look at it and say, this is garbage. This is not quality. Those higher end buyers know the types of appliances. They know the types of paint. They know the types of light fixtures. As a matter of fact, with $1 million houses, most of them, you can't even go to Home Depot and actually buy the lights. You've got to go to a specialty lighting store. And unless you're familiar with those things, you're getting yourselves in trouble. So you'd be better off not going after those higher end price ranges, not having the stars in your eyes. So there's lots of wannabe investors that want to do $1 million. It really doesn't work, guys. It really doesn't. It also takes a lot longer to find those properties. So we want to stay in these medium ranges. This is how we can understand our time frames, is stay in the medium range. We want to stay out of the low income. We don't want to be in the expensive. Really, we want to be in blue collar areas. We want to be in the medium price range for that area under the FHA limit. Now, if we're doing those things, that's going to help us find a property faster. So, and I'm going to get to this. I'm going to answer this for you. So in the area, this is the other thing that really comes into consideration is where are you investing? Because if you're in a rural area, it's going to be difficult. In rural areas, it's difficult to find comparables. It's hard to find vendors and people to do repairs. It's harder to find new buyers because there's less people that could be buyers of that. There's less of a market, meaning less transactions that are actually happening. It's harder to get loans in those areas. And those are some of the reasons why rural is just plain difficult. So what is rural? Well, typically, if there's a large distance between the subject property and the population center. So how far are you from a major metro? Poor or small selection of comparable sales and listings. Lack of traditional utilities. Maybe it's on septic. Maybe you have to on a well, those types of things. The number of agricultural land comes into play here, farming or grazing. And so also if the appraiser has to come back in time to find comparables, meaning if he has to go a year rather than 6 months or 3 months, that's a concern. Traditional FHA lenders have the area as agriculture. That would mean it's rural, okay? Ask your hard money lender where they lend. This is a big tip. If you're in some sort of a rural area, you say, hey, will you lend in this area or not? So what if your hard money lender will not lend in that area? Well, you should really be thinking about this. You should drive. It's easier for you to drive than find a good hard money lender in that area. Chances are if one hard money lender will not lend there, most won't want to either because they really want to be in the major metropolitan areas. What is the closest area that your hard money lender will lend in? So if you won't lend here, well, where will you lend? And I'll drive an hour or 30 minutes or whatever the case is. So I'm in an area where you will lend. And you really want to stay in your major metropolitan areas or the suburbs of those major metropolitan areas. All right, guys, the next thing I really want to talk about here is competition. And this is really hard to judge, but it has a big impact. The more competition that's out there, the harder it's going to be to find a good deal. How many other investors are there in the areas? How many postcards, phone calls, door knocks of motivated sellers are they currently getting? How many people are knocking on those doors? This is really hard to determine, but it has a big impact on the time it will take you to find a deal. All that said, don't be scared. Just because there's competition there doesn't mean that you should shy away. It does not mean that you should be scared. If there's a lot of competition, it means there is money to be had there. You've just got to find a way to compete. You're going to have to work harder. You're going to have to be more patient, and then you can actually have that success. But if there is high competition, you've got to plan on taking more time. So you just want to be prepared for that and realize it is going to take more time, and I need to be ready for that. Let's talk about these strategies to find properties. This has a big impact in the time frame. One of the things we're going to talk about here is motivation. If people don't have motivation, you're not going to get a deal. Second thing is equity. If they don't have equity, it's a lot harder to try and make a deal happen. So one of the things that I recommend to get a deal done faster is to do what's called build lists. Build lists of motivation. There are a variety of lists that you can build. There's vacant homes, there's involuntary liens, there's bankruptcies, there's out-of-state owners, non-owner occupied, pre-foreclosures, failed listings. All of these are people that are going through a circumstance where they probably have some motivation. If somebody's in a foreclosure, they probably have some motivation to sell their house, or bankruptcy. Does that mean everybody that's in a foreclosure is motivated to sell their house? No, they're not. But hopefully you'll find people that are more motivated to do those things. The next thing I want to look at though is equity, okay? So if I want equity, compare the amount that's owed to the AVM, the automated value management. If there's equity, then you market to those people. Now that doesn't mean that that AVM is right. It just means there's a spread, and if there's a spread, I should be getting in front of them and having some conversations. So how do you market? Well, you can door knock, you can knock on doors, you can send postcards, you can call people, you can text message, you can email them. These are different ways that you can get in touch with people, but you want to get in touch with the right people with the right marketing. People have motivation and people have equity, and then I want to get in front of those people one way or another. The more the motivation they have, the faster that you will actually get a deal done. And I want to make a big special note here. I did say the right marketing, because you can really screw up marketing if you're not saying the right things or doing the right things, and you could be in front of the right prospects. So then we get into this whole thing about your commitment. Too many people give up before they have success. They start realizing that this is hard. You know, it's not just HGTV that the home comes easy in the first 20 seconds of the show. It's not easy, but it is possible, okay? It is possible. So time, you need to spend about 10 to 15 hours per week finding properties. This can be a few days a week, or it can be a few hours each day, but you need to plan on about 10 to 15 hours per week. You've got to be committed to put in the time each week before the success comes. You've got to be willing to put the time in. And that's what I like to call welcome to the grind. This is the grind where you're like, I'm doing these things, and am I going to have success? Because I don't know. And you have to keep doing it and doing it. This is a grind. But the good news for all of you that are listening is most people give up way too soon. They look at the get rich quick type strategies, and this takes some time. Finding a good deal is everything. And if you can find a good deal, then you can have the success that you're looking for. But the first deal is always the hardest. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said, hey, the first deal took me 5 years. Holy cow, why did this take you 5 years? Because he had to develop the courage. He had to go take some action. He was interested, and then he stopped being interested. And then he looked again. Like, it was an emotional thing trying to figure out and make the commitment. Now, once he made the commitment, it took him about 12 months to find his second deal. And then his third deal, he got it done in just a few months. You can see the progression here. There is a learning curve. There is a reason why they are doing more than you are doing, because they know something that you don't know. Now, how can I make that learning curve smaller? Is by going with somebody that understands what they're doing and doing the same things that they like to do. There's a lot that went into that, right? You have to learn. You have to build confidence. You have to develop a work ethic. You have to have some failures. You really don't know what you're doing until you make some mistakes, right? I don't think it needs to take that long. It really doesn't. So what you can do is build a plan, okay? What we're gonna do is build a plan, which is called reverse engineering your success. When I reverse engineer my success, I basically say my end goal is to get one deal. If I want to get one deal, what do I have to do? Well, I probably need to make 4 offers. If I want to make 4 offers, what do I need to do? I probably need to have about 7 appointments where I meet a motivated seller at their house. Well, if I want to get 7 appointments, how would I get those? I would probably need to have 10 prospects, 10 people that were interested to get those 7 appointments. Which means I probably need to have about 400 conversations, because out of 400 conversations, probably 10 of those will be interested. Which means I need about 1,680 leads in order to have 400 conversations. Which means I probably need to find about 2,400 homes that I'm actually going to be targeting and I'm going to be going after. Now, this works really well with a strategy called driving for dollars. But here's the thing, you have to keep track of your numbers. These numbers are not going to be the same. These are some averages, these are some ideas, these are some starting points. And that's one of the things I like to say is the goal, the starting point, get you moving in the right direction. As you're moving in that right direction, you're able to make some adjustments, which means you need to track your own numbers. You may find out you have to have 500 conversations. In other areas, you may have to have 200 conversations. You may find out that you only need 3 appointments, or you may need 10 appointments. It's less about how many you need, and it's more about knowing how many you need on average. And you do that by trial and error. You do that by watching it and seeing what happens and keeping track of what you had to do. Because if you've done it once, then you can replicate your success. You can wash and you can repeat. And the way that you can do that is tracking those numbers, knowing what you're doing, and then doing it a second time and knowing you have to replicate your success. It's really great. Once you get that first deal under your belt and you know I have to make 1,000 phone calls to end up getting one deal, then you know each time you have a bad phone call, you're getting closer to that 1,000 mark to find the deal that you really want. So this is what's called our next property roadmap. The next property roadmap helps you determine how long it's going to take for you to end up getting a deal. So we ask a lot of questions here, right? How many hours can you drive in a week? How many days per week? What marketing strategy are you going to want to do? And there's multiple options here. How many miles between properties? How many properties can you find driving? And then this basically breaks out for you how many weeks it'll take before you get your first contract. And again, this is averages. This is no guarantee. This just gives you an idea of where you should be going, a direction that you should be there. It's different for every area, as we've been discussing, because so many elements, but this gives you a North Star. It's just you moving in the right direction, and you learn as you go, and you can adjust these numbers for your specific area. So it tells you each week what you should be doing each week, what your conversations need to be. This is the next deal roadmap, which can help you design a custom-made plan. And that's how I can answer this question. How long is it going to take you to get a deal? You've got to make a custom-made plan, and then you've got to work the plan. You see, if you're going to put sweat equity in and you're going to go out there and do it yourself, that's going to take a little longer than if you had $5,000 you could invest in marketing. If you can invest in marketing, you can cut your time down. If you don't have money to invest in marketing, then you need to go out there and beat the streets and make those things happen. So that's how this works. But in doing all of this, you've got to keep track of your numbers. And as you keep track of those numbers, you make some adjustments along the way. As you make some adjustments, you stay committed. As you stay committed, you start to find the success.